Missiles thrown at police cars and buildings on fire. Ugly scenes in Sunderland last night. But what will this evening bring? Good evening. There is an increased police presence in a number of towns and cities across the country tonight, where far-right protesters have been gathering. In some places, dispersal notices or increased stop-and-search powers are in place to tackle antisocial behaviour, while a number of police officers have been injured in Liverpool and Hull, and there have been incidents this afternoon in Manchester, Stoke, Nottingham and Belfast. Riot police have separated rival far-right and anti-racist protesters who are facing off in a number of cities across the UK. In the last few minutes, police said they had made 4 arrests in Hull, where 3 officers were hurt during clashes. Our reporter Andrew Misra is in Liverpool, where police say they're dealing with serious disorder in the city centre, and a number of officers have been injured there too. Andrew.
Kieran, we haven't seen the same level of violence that we saw in Sunderland last night here in Liverpool this afternoon, but there has been serious disorder, as you say. One police officer was even hit in the head by a chair, and a lot of anger we've seen here from rival groups of protesters. There's been a big police presence working really hard to try to contain those 2 groups. It has settled down a little bit now. And you can probably see behind me that there are still sirens, the police are still here, and there's a police helicopter still whirring above us. And at the same time as things felt like they were kicking off here, if you looked on social media, you were seeing very similar scenes of rival protesters around the country. We are expecting a statement from the Home Secretary about all of this any minute now, but what doesn't seem to have helped is that the weather has been very warm today, and that seems to have created a pretty febrile atmosphere.
That is disgusting!
The weekend, but no end to the disorder, chaos and noise of the past week. From Liverpool to Hull to Belfast.
Sometimes all they need is just a hug.
The afternoon started peacefully in Liverpool with an anti-racism protest at St George's Hall. Many in Merseyside horrified by riots that disrupted the grieving of 3 young girls, Alice, Bibi and Elsie, murdered in Southport just a few days ago.
It's a peace vigil for the 3 dead children, the injured, the families. We will not tolerate racism, not in this city, not in this country, not in this world.
I have no doubt whatsoever that the lovers out there far outnumber the haters, and that's what it's about, people coming together. We tend to find that people who are on the fringes of society, they're angry, they're very, very loud online, when you go to these protests and rallies, but in reality the vast majority of people just want to live a peaceful life.
After opposing protesters gathered outside a Liverpool mosque last night, a similar situation on a larger scale at the Pierhead this afternoon. There are hundreds of protesters here either side of a long line of police. On the far side we've heard Islamophobic chants and shouts in favour of Tommy Robinson. On this side, chants against fascism and in favour of refugees. This was mostly non-violent, unlike Sunderland last night, where people were out to cause trouble. Faces hidden, intent clear. Bricks thrown at riot police outside a mosque, cars and buildings burned. Officers attacked, scenes worryingly familiar from recent nights.
If this is the response that they have to a really horrendous, violent murder of 3 little girls somewhere else in the country, if they want to use somebody else's grief to create violence, then they stand for nothing other than thuggery.
The day after the stabbing, far-right rioters in Southport were fuelled by misinformation about the suspect. False rumours he was an asylum seeker proved definitively to be untrue after the suspect was charged with the murders and named as Axel Radicabana, born in Cardiff. But the initial outrage from the far right has taken hold and spread onto the streets of so many UK towns and cities. Back in Merseyside, landmarks will glow pink again tonight to put the spotlight back on the memory of 3 little girls who were just at a dance class when their lives were ended.
Andrew Misra there. Well, in a moment, we'll be speaking to the leader of Stoke-on-Trent Council, Jane Ashworth, where hundreds of protesters have been gathering today amid reports of some outbreaks of violence. But first, Kim McGuinness, Mayor of the North East, who's been dealing with the fallout of last night's clashes in Sunderland. And they were ugly scenes, weren't they, Kim? What's the mood in Sunderland this evening?
Well, they were really ugly scenes, and, you know, we were really shocked and horrified by what we saw in Sunderland last night. But the mood today is one of a community coming together and standing very strong against what we saw last night. You know, the community taking part in a massive clear-up operation this morning alongside the council, and making it very, very clear that those people rioting and seeking to cause violence do not speak for us. So I've come from last night feeling really angry and disappointed and shocked that these people think it's okay to behave like this in our towns and cities, to feeling really heartened by the community response today.
But Sunderland is a long way from Southport, isn't it? Why do you think that Sunderland was the focus of last night's disorder?
It is a long way from Southport, and of course these people organised what they were calling a peaceful protest on the auspices that it was about the horrific murders of those 3 little girls in Southport. But it was very clear from the very beginning that it was never about that at all. It was an excuse and a ruse to cause disorder and violence and chaos on our streets, and to attack and abuse people, and to adopt language of division and hate, which is just not acceptable, whilst attacking the police. I think we've seen, and it's been very clear over the last few days, that this is very organised. It's an organised right-wing agenda that we're seeing spread throughout the media, and it needs to come down.
Sorry to come in there, Kim, but the Deputy Leader of Sunderland Council said that many people were not from the city and came to cause chaos. What do you know about where they did come from then?
And I'm sure that that's quite true. You know, people have, we've heard reports over the last day or so of people saying there are recognisable faces from other protests around the country. But the fact is that these have been organised and coordinated nationally online by the right wing, and they are encouraging people to commit very serious crime and disorder, and to spread hate and division in our towns and cities.
And what's going to put a stop to it, Kim? What's going to put a stop to this disorder?
Well, we've seen a very strong police response, certainly in Sunderland, and I'm very grateful to Northumbria Police for that. They continue to make arrests today, and I want these people to face the full force of the law. But at the same time, you know, we really need to tackle the cause of this, and really hold the social media companies that are allowing hate and disinformation and the organisation of these events to spread online, and identify those people who are starting this in those right-wing groups who are seeking to commit this violence on our streets. OK,
Kim McGuinness, Mayor of the North East, thank you very much for speaking with us. Let's go now to Jane Ashworth, who's the leader of Stoke-on-Trent City Council. What's your understanding, Jane, of the violence and disorder, the extent of it in Stoke today?
It's not been as bad as it has in other parts of the country, I'm very pleased to say. It appears to be the case that, as Kim McGuinness said, organised through social media, about a few hundred people turned up, clearly intent on causing trouble. It was their intention to whip up emotions. It was their intention to take on the police where possible. It was their intention to, I think, probably right from the start, though I can't be sure, to march on an unguarded mosque in part of the town centre.
And did they? What happened?
It's still going on. It's still going on. But what we're seeing that's probably extremely interesting and extremely important is that while this is going on and the police are going to be able to contain them, there's no problem about that here, is that the social media companies are allowing people to say that someone's been stabbed when they haven't. There is no record of a stabbing.
So you're speaking in relation to reports of violent clashes between protesters and counter-protesters outside a mosque in Handley. Now, there have been some reports about what may have happened there, but there have been violent clashes there. You're sure of that?
Yes, missiles have been thrown. That's correct.
And have there been injuries?
Some minor injuries. At the moment, what it seems to be the case is that injuries are minor. Now, that may turn out to be more serious as the day progresses. So I couldn't say that for certain, but that appears to be the case. 4 people have been arrested at the moment. And as I say, the matters are still going on.
So you believe the situation is under control right now?
Yes, yes.
What are your fears for what may happen this evening?
I think it's possible tonight that more people may want to join in, or it's possible that some people will decide, if they genuinely attended the demonstration today because they felt deeply moved by the situation in Stockport, they didn't realise who was organising it, that it was the hard far right, then they may well have gone home already. That's pretty likely. I think if you'd made a mistake, you'd go.
What's your message, Jane, to those who are still on the streets of Stoke-on-Trent this evening?
Go home, and for everybody else, it's to be ready for us, the council that is, together with the police. We will be issuing statements about how we get people together. We're talking to faith leaders too. We need to mobilise the decent people in the city to tell those residents of Stoke-on-Trent and those outsiders who joined in today that really we're not putting up with it.
Jane Ashworth, thank you so much for speaking with us. Well, clamping down on the unrest is posing a major challenge for police forces around the country, as well as the government, which will be eager to avoid the kind of wide-scale disorder last seen during the riots in 2011. So what powers do the police have, and how far will they be able to keep the situation from escalating? Simeon Brown has this.
For 10 months, central London has been shut down by the call for a ceasefire in Gaza. But this weekend, there is fear that far rights may descend again. Now police resources are being stretched nationwide to stop them.
This weekend, the police are facing huge operational challenges. And although this protest has been peaceful so far, up and down the country, there are splintered far-right groups, and they're spoiling for a fight.
More than 30 far-right demonstrations had been planned across Scotland, England, Wales and Northern Ireland. The authorities are now braced for a 4th night of unrest since the outbreak in Southport. This was Manchester city centre earlier.
Stop the boat!
Stop the boat, screams this activist, the slogan once embraced by Rishi Sunak. In response, the counter-protesters say refugees welcome. The buffer between both sides is held by a line of officers who have found themselves targeted by far-right demonstrators in the largest outbreak of civil disorder since 2011.
You were brought in as borough commander overseeing Tottenham following the 2011 disorder to implement the lessons learned. Do you see parallels with the nature of the disorder right now?
I think mobilisation is absolutely key. Very few police forces will have enough resources to be able to deal with the disorders in their area. I mean, the Met and the bigger force, Metropolitan Police Service, your West Midlands, probably big enough to be able to manage dealing with multiple seats of disorder. But most forces are probably not big enough, and they will need what we describe as local aid.
There are other shared themes of 2011. When unrest broke out in Tottenham following the police killing of Mark Duggan, nationwide dissent was organised on BlackBerry Messenger. Today, the app's influence has been dwarfed by the convening power of social media.
People are actually sending messages to each other really quickly. People are gathering really quickly. It doesn't give the police enough time to be able to prepare and actually move as quickly. And those challenges I see as very similar.
But social media apps have not just mobilised but misinformed. In response to the murders of Alice de Silva Aguiar, BB King and Elsie Stankoom, it was on X, Telegram and WhatsApp where far-right disinformation was shared, falsely claiming the attacker was a newly arrived refugee of Islamic heritage. Now the flames of those untruths are yet to be quelled, and the government is under pressure to restore order.
What we sought to do in 2011 was to ensure that people who were arrested were being brought before the courts within 12 to 24 hours. And we had all-night courts, and the consequence of that was that very quickly the message was communicated that if you engaged in this type of behaviour, you were likely to find yourself ending up in prison.
This is the far right's march in Manchester. As these outbreaks continue across the country, the lid on violence against minorities has been lifted.